Welcome everybody to the June meeting of Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, Ottawa. My name is Mick Wilson. I'm the meeting coordinator, and I'd like to extend a welcome to all our RASC members, especially those from other centres and especially new members here in Ottawa. Chris, next please. Usual warnings, we are recording everything, so be careful with what you say and who you threaten. If you're on Zoom, use the Q&A to ask questions, not the raise your hand function, and anything that goes in the chat box can be seen by all. Next. A series of mea culpas. Next one, Chris. And there are transgressions on 3 counts, which I need to apologise. One is transgression by relocation. This was not our fault. There was a mix-up at Chasm. We didn't have access to the auditorium, and so with a bit over 24 hours notice, we had to shuffle everything back to a Zoom-only format. So if things are a bit rusty and, I don't know, there might be speakers that didn't get their panelists invitation and so on, I apologize in advance. Second one, Chris. Transgression by innovation. Of course, this shift in the venue would have to happen precisely at the time when we're trying a new means for pulling together the presentations. Much more reliant on the internet. This is the first trial of it. Again, if there are glitches, bear with us, and I apologize in advance. Third one, transgression by avoidation. Anyone who was out there thinking that they could kidnap the cream of Ottawa's astronomical knowledge by a raid on Chasm tonight, you're frustrated because we're all in dispersed locations, so there. Next, please. So, quick intro, me. We've got special guests coming in from Kenya. This is the Travelling Telescope who spoke to us 2.5 years ago. Susan, Murabana, and Owen, they're online ready to go. Then we catch up with the presentation of Hugo's Eclipse experience that I missed last month. Then we get back to normal business. So I'll do the members in the news, welcome to new members, all that stuff. Dave will do the Ottawa skies. Malcolm then steps in for the first scheduled presentation with his narrowband imaging how-to. And again, apologise to Malcolm. This has been pushed back a couple of months because of various scheduling issues on my part. We've got the normal break and Astro trivia. Richard is then going to show us his killer techniques for Eclipse image processing. And hopefully this is still newsworthy, even though we're 2 months after the eclipse. We've got the observation reports and lots of aurora stuff. Richard comes back then with the meeting challenges, and then I'll close out with the normal announcements and so on. And with that, please, Chris, let's go to our special invited guests coming to us all the way from Kenya, Travelling Telescope. Next, please.
Well, at this point, I'll stop sharing.
No, there's one more, please.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, Kat. Yep, one more. Just to recap, for those of you that weren't with us in 2022, Travelling Telescope is a social enterprise. It promotes astronomical education and science-based entertainment, primarily to schools, but also lodges, hotels, and even to individuals. It's the only outfit doing such things in the East African region. And they are a youth partner with Airbus and the Little Engineers, which means they have resources for serving underprivileged schools in Kenya. And so with that now, Chris, please, if you would hand over to Susie and Chu.
Hello, good afternoon, I guess, in Canada. This is a very early morning for us, but we should be used to it since we do a lot of stargazing here. I'm Susan Murabana, and this is...
I'm Chu. Hello, everybody. Nice to have you.
And together we make the Traveling Telescope with a few other astrophysicists. And we have Ronald, who's obviously not here with us, sleeping somewhere 20 minutes away from us, and Sylvain, who's a bit further. And just to talk a little bit about what we do, we are an astronomy outreach organization, and we focus mainly on education and astrotourism in the region. So we've gone to hundreds of schools in Kenya and reached hundreds of thousands of kids directly. These kids have looked through our telescope and also visited our planetarium. So we'll just talk a little bit about what we do and share our slides. If I'm allowed to share, because I can see the screen sharing is disabled.
I have no idea why you wouldn't be able to share.
If you click on the green share button and allow multiple screen sharing,
okay,
then I'll
try that. How about that now for you?
That's got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's see if it works. Yeah, so we're happy to be joining you. We didn't know what date to put, but yes, we are the founders and we are partners in the Traveling Telescope. And we're going to talk to you about our Under African Skies. So the telescope has been around for quite a long time, just more than 400 years. And yet so many people haven't had a chance to look through one. In Kenya and in most parts of Africa, most people have not looked through one. And at times when I give talks about what we do, people think it's a security threat. I got to learn that recently when I gave a talk to Rotarians. But this is the thing we're trying to change as a Traveling Telescope, to give as many people as possible, especially the young, the next generation of leaders from Africa, an opportunity to look through the telescope and to get fascinated by the sky and to wander and explore and try and figure out what all those dots are all about. So I really like this picture. It was taken when we're in Turkana by this guy over here.
This guy here.
It was very interesting. We went to Turkana, is in the northern part of Kenya. It's very remote, very removed from the rest of Kenya, and yet it has beautiful dark skies. So we were with a community that neither spoke English or Kiswahili, which is the national language, and it was hard to explain the different concepts we had. But we got connected with the sky, and you can see this young boy looking up, even with the telescope right in front of him. And we feel that the telescope is a gateway for children like him to explore, this resource they have.
Just before you move on, one other thing about that is that Turkana is also a place where a lot of ancient human remains have been found, as well as a lot of extinct animals. We were privileged to have known Richard Leakey, and he showed us around this collection of fossils that he was going to make into a museum. And it was just like, you're talking back in time with the animals at the same time as talking back in time about what the light that you're seeing from some distant galaxy.
So I'll go to the next slide. I don't know why that didn't work. I'll skip this. So I think we've said we use astronomy tools and concepts to promote astronomy. In 2020, during the height of COVID, we received the Europlanet Award for our public engagement. That was very special at the time when we thought we needed to park and stop doing what we were doing. We've also been featured on local and international media. They seem to like our voice.
They like Susan's voice.
And we're the youth partners of Airbus Foundation, although our partnership is coming to an end after a good number of years. So this is a picture of the very beginning of the Traveling Telescope. Chu and I met during a trip to Turkana, the picture I showed you, northern Kenya in 2013 when there was a total solar eclipse, which I brought. I have the powers. No,
which was 15 seconds long. It was like, it was, you know, you guys that have just witnessed these ones that have been in the US, I just so jealous of Mexico.
Yeah, so Chu ended up coming from the UK, and there are all these other eclipse chasers who came from all parts of the world and some from Kenya. And we traveled, it was an overland trip, we called it, and it was in partnership with Rotary. I'm a Rotarian, Rotary Club of Nairobi, and we called it the Rotary Overland Turkana Eclipse Challenge, something like that. Anyway, I ended up meeting Chu, and we realized we both loved astronomy. And immediately after that, we started traveling around schools. This was one of the first schools we went to with our small telescope. And there were more than 1,000 kids very excited, waiting to look through the telescope. And immediately we knew there was an interest, irrespective of where we are, for what we wanted to do. And this, in a way, without us knowing, was our needs analysis. So we've done that. We've traveled across. We're getting to our 10th year. We are in our 10th year, actually, because in August we'll be celebrating 10 years since we started. And we've had around 500 children look, 500,000 children look directly through the telescope. At times during the day, it's not something we like to do, but mostly at night. And we've been traveling across schools, giving as many kids an opportunity to look through and explore the night sky. I should just explain that one isn't someone looking directly at the sun. We were just talking about how the telescope works and looking at a tree in the distance. We have done a few things during the day though. We did many years back. Whoa, when was that? 2014 maybe? 15. There was a transit of Mercury, which was visible for us, and it was brilliant. We managed to see that from a school in Kenya, which was a real highlight, actually, seeing, you know, don't often get to see Mercury. I know during a total eclipse it's possible. Yes, thank you. So the reason we got into very passionate about sharing what we do with schools is because when I first looked through a telescope and saw Saturn in its rings, I was in my 20s and I was fascinated and wondered why I'd never had that experience as a young girl in school. And similarly, Chu felt that there's so much to explore given tools like this. So we felt visiting schools is something we really wanted to share and see young people get excited about the sky. So in addition to that, we have a mobile planetarium, actually 2 domes that we take around. And right about the same time we started the traveling telescope, we received a donation of our planetarium, which led up to us buying our own planetarium in 2019. And then, you know, taking it around schools, it really works well because it's a daytime activity. The kids can forgo their science class and have an experience with us in the planetarium and get immersed and feel like they're actually landing on the moon or whizzing through the different planets. So we've also reached about an equivalent number of kids, about 500,000, maybe more, because now we've also built, I don't know, in 2022 when we talked to you, whether we talked about our planetarium. We built a planetarium. Actually, Chu is the one who built planetarium out of bamboo. I helped a little bit, but initially when he had the idea, he was like, I'm gonna build a planetarium out of bamboo, and I was like, oh my god, it's not gonna look nice. But it ended up looking really nice. It looks like a flying saucer. It's open air. It's really cool. I don't know if you have images, and this is how it looks. It doesn't look anything like the planetariums you've visited if you've been to any, and I'm sure you have. And this is the inside of our planetarium. It's right at the heart of our city, Nairobi. And we do get a lot of visitors. We're not opened every day. We open on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. And on Fridays, we seem to have the Gen Zs who keep coming and advertising us for free on TikTok, which has really worked well
It was
for us.
really weird when that happened.
And then we have school groups and everything. And it's reached a point where Chu and I don't even do the presentations. I'm not the planetarians. We have a team of Ronald and Sylvans mainly who do the shows and everything, and we listen.
Who we trained.
Yes. So our planetarium is in our backyard.
Mm.
So you end up listening to them and inviting people to explore. You want to point
No,
out
just
something?
the one on the left isn't the inside our, that's in the mobile one. But the
No,
one
this is inside the planetarium. It is with Kyoto.
yeah,
Sorry.
but it was with the inflatable screen. But anyway.
Okay. And then this is our partnership with Airbus Foundation. It's a space robotics program where we go to really underserved schools and enhance their learning with this program. We've done it for close to 7 years now, and it's coming to an end. And we've reached, initially when we started, we'd go to 40 schools per year. And so we've reached quite a number of school kids with this program. It was a good addition to what we talk about when we go to schools. When we talk about, when we try to inspire them into astronomy or space exploration or space sciences, the whole conversation of engineers who build the rockets and the programmers and the whole industry of people who support 1 or 2 astronauts to go to space, and the big industry that waits for even African and Kenyan kids to be part of. And we're excited that Kenya now has a space agency, and there's a growing space community that's starting to we're starting to see in the country. I will just talk a little bit, and I'll allow you to speak so that I'm not hogging the whole presentation. But this is the other side of what we do. This is the astrotourism side. Kenya, which is an East African country, is right at the equator. And that means we get to see both the northern and southern sky. But because we're right at the equator, things look really crisp, clear when they're overhead. And it's nice. There are places you can go to at night where you don't even need to wear a sweater. And the communities that are used to, they're connected with the natural world, like this guide who's also a Maasai from the community there. Is very connected to nature, the sky and the wildlife around. You can see elephants in the background. So this is the business side of our product, and also a way for us to get buy-in from Kenyans, you know. So we do offer astro tourism nights. We call them star safaris because we give people a guided tour of the night sky as they enjoy views through the telescope. And it's really educating and entertaining guests. And at the same time, you know, trying to hold Kenya or our region proud in terms of this resource we have. A night, I don't know if you want to add.
Well, maybe just that I'm from the UK originally, and you get used to sort of stargazing wherever you begin your stargazing journey. And for me, that was in the UK, and then particularly up into Scotland as well, and just to try and find some less light polluted skies. But obviously, Kenya's got amazing skies, amazing for the low levels of light pollution, but then also the ecliptic and the zodiac, or the constellations go above your head. And actually tonight, unfortunately, we had cloud and rain, but I was hoping while we were waiting to join you to be able to image this comet, which apparently has got very bright, which is pretty much at the zenith, 7 or 8 o'clock for us at the moment. So it doesn't really get better for some of those things that are along that line for the planets. You know, you get great views of that stuff.
So we've had interest with the Kenyan tourism ministry, and this was the former cabinet secretary of tourism, Honorable Najib Balala, who was invited for a tourism summit. We were speakers and we had the telescope. It was so nice to see that he was fascinated, and he saw that angle of selling Kenya as an astrotourism site. So we feel that which is strange. Getting buy-in from the tourism where the money can come in is easier than getting buy-in from the education ministry. As I said, we do what we call star safaris. We give guided tours of the night sky. Even just getting the green laser pointer out and pointing at the sky is always fascinating. But I think we're both very excited to have, you know, the local communities sometimes share stories with us, and very keen to learn about the modern science as well, which is something we always experience. And in the world that we're living in today, there seems to be a lot of division. And I know most people are really good and kind and everything, but we are also experiencing a lot of, you know, nationalistic behavior, is that a word? and I think every time we go out to that telescope, and we have others now, not just one, we always feel this sense of collectiveness. We are together, and if not anything else, just having people realize that we need to work together as humanity to solve the problems they have. Right now, Kenya and other neighboring countries just had devastating floods that have wrecked homes, and the most affected have been women and children, and you know, vulnerable communities. And it's very hard to solve these problems as individuals, but really, if you work together, it's much easier. And again, this could be because of the way we've treated our planet. So hopefully we get people to have a better understanding and appreciation of our host planet and people of influence. For example, maybe we said it the last time we were with you, we've had Madonna, the musician, and she's a musician, but he couldn't sing. We've had her as one of our guests at night with her family, and her reaction was exactly the same as a barefooted, very underserved kid in a remote village. And that just cements or makes us feel what we're doing is really important. Just, you know, that connection of, you know, the few wealthy, really wealthy, and then whatever we get from that, being able to support or inspire a young kid from a very remote part of Kenya or Tanzania.
I was just going to briefly, I've realized that I think the large Magellanic Cloud is behind us. There we go. So if I just move us over there, I don't know if you could have seen that before, but anyway, there's a story in Maasai culture, which is this is in the Maasai area where we are, which is that when they start to see this this cloud, and they know that it's coming, obviously they've been watching the skies under very good skies, dark skies for thousands of years, probably before anyone else. So it's nice to have like those things. And they say when they see that start to rise in the morning, I presume, that's when you start to expect the rains, particular rains. There's like 2 rainy seasons here.
So this is some of the images taken through our telescopes. We have the moon and you see the craters, and this is what our guests, whether they're school kids or local international tourists or community leaders, get to see, and we get to chat about these beautiful heavenly bodies. Then again, you know, having that curiosity from communities. This is the Maasai in Tanzania. It was a really nice night. Unfortunately, it was cloudy and we didn't get to explore the skies on that night.
It opened up and rained a lot.
Yeah. And I just keep that. I think we both strongly feel that every child, at least once in their lifetime, should have a chance to look through a telescope or visit a planetarium, or even without these tools, have a lesson under the night sky. And hopefully that can open their views about, you know, the possibilities, especially for kids in, you know, places like Kenya where they grow up in a village and their possibilities are very limited. Hopefully we can open up for them the possibilities of, you know, being, you know, still contributing to their community, but being bigger or aiming for bigger than what they can or have seen. I think we have more time, but what we want to do now is stop sharing and see if there are any questions, or if you can ask you any questions. Thank you.
Mick, you're muted.
Okay, all better?
That's better.
So thank you both. You never disappoint. For the context of the people here in Ottawa, I first encountered Chu and Susie when they brought their show, including singing and dancing, to my daughter's school when she was in year 8. That was 2014. And in the years since then in Kenya, next couple of years, we did a number of activities together. I have so admired your work the whole time. I'm so pleased that you got through COVID. I wasn't sure whether you'd be able to get the people together with all the restrictions, and to hear that your team has grown. I think it's absolutely fabulous. Before I hand over for questions, the other thing I'd like to point out, that's one of my favorite stories to tell over beers here, Kenya is the only place where I have seen my shadow cast by the Milky Way. There's a few other people have had that experience, but to me, it's one of my most unique memories of Kenya. And so I will lead out with a question, as I always do. What's next? What's the future? How long can you keep doing this for?
Funny you should ask that. We're sort of in a point now where we're actually 10 years old, coming up in August, and we're very excited about that we managed to, particularly like you mentioned, make it through COVID. So we're hoping to do a little I don't know, a big star party out in the bush. I think is on the cards for the Perseids. The trouble is, it's on a Monday night.
Yes, so that's a really good question, Mick, and thank you for taking us down memory lane, and just taking us back to meeting you and our performances.
Your humble beginnings.
Our humble beginnings are still very humble now, I think. But yeah, so COVID was a difficult time. We tried to engage our audience with, showing the moon through Zoom and songs, which we did. We did a few songs.
And a quiz. We did a cosmic quiz.
Yeah, if you check our
Oh.
website and our YouTube channel, we have a few songs. We did a song about the annular eclipse. It's the only annular eclipse song with our kids. That was during COVID, and we won a tiny prize for it. I was so excited. They're like, we're going to the red carpet. Well, it wasn't one of those. And then we had like the cosmic quiz, which we did at the height of COVID when everything was shut down, and we were able to get participants join from all over the world. At some point, we had around 100 participants, which was really fun. And now what's next? I think we both get a lot of satisfaction from the Astro tourism projects, because what we've done with some of the lodges is, or mostly lodges, like high-end lodges, they are in these remote places and get a lot of money, and yet the communities around there are very poor, and the schools are very poor. So sometimes we get to also visit the schools. So we really like the arrangement we have, and just getting to explore these regions. And then also the school projects, going to schools, we're getting repeat school clients. We have some come to our planetarium here, or we take the planetarium. We still want to continue that, but we're at a place where we want to see whether we could do something. We're looking for something, a new life, so another twist to what we do. It could be, a mobile bigger truck where we travel across. That's what Chu's really keen to do.
There's two things I'd quite like to do. Yeah.
It could be building a public observatory. We don't know, but we really are trying to find the next thing. And maybe the next thing is just what we're doing, and just, we still don't know, but it's something we're excited to look at possibilities. Choose. going to shock me now.
Well, no, it's just we talked about on and off. In fact, ever since we met, there's two things we talked about. In fact, even before I came to live in Kenya, remember we were saying about like an overland truck, which has got like an onboard sort of suite of science kind of cool things. I mean, obviously telescope. I mean, I imagine a sort of a planetarium which can open out. Partly because a lot of the schools that we work with here in Kenya have got really small, well, they don't have halls. They don't have like these big sports halls. They have an outdoor sort of football area quite often, but the classrooms, the buildings, the actual school buildings are all tiny. Well, they're just small and they've got small roofs and they're just not set up for planetarium. You know, for our inflatable one, which we have quite a big one, and some of these schools have got thousands of kids. So having a big one's really useful because you can get like 50 kids in each show. But if they don't have the space to do it, then, you know, and that's something I've been trying to work on. So we built our planetarium in the garden out of bamboo, and I've since sort of continued working with bamboo and trying to understand it and build stuff with it. You know, there's quite a list of things I've attempted and some things have worked better than others. But I'm in the process of building a sort of an umbrella-like sort of planetarium, which opens out these huge long arms, which then become the frame, the skeleton of a planetarium, which is kind of a big tent, but with a UV and some shade net sort of fabric, which means that you can have, because the inflatable doesn't work outside. It's very hot under the sun.
And you've got the bloody thorn trees to worry about.
Oh, I mean, they're really angry on the ground. Wow, those little things, they get stuck in your shoes and they are tough and they really hurt if you don't have shoes on. So yeah, being able to do have a good mobile not just planetarium, mobile setup, which it would include a planetarium and a big telescope. And I've also got my eye on a very good mobile telescope, which is large. We've also we're very lucky to have been donated a very fancy image enhancing telescope, which some of you may have come across already, called a Eviscope or a Unistellar. And this has become really, really cool because at star parties, obviously traditionally, and I'm sure some of you are traditional astronomers, you know, you've got the faint fuzzies, but this little thing, it shows them loud and clear and very, very bright. Obviously you explain that it's a detector and it's adding up sort of time, and like the big telescopes do. So it's got its own little sort of niche, but sharing that around is also brilliant. So it's not all about, you know, it doesn't have to be a massive one, although obviously for size, for magnifying the planets and the moon, which, as I said earlier, do get really good here. It is brilliant to have, you know, a decent sort of powered thing. And then a binocular chair, that's something else which I've got plans to, you know, I haven't maybe told them to you. But yeah, I want to make a bamboo. Obviously all this is bamboo binocular chair, an off-road vehicle for the big heavy telescope. And then I also want to make a solar cooker and using a parabolic reflector on bamboo, which will track and rotate. And that will hopefully share with people why one of the sort of spin-offs from astronomy, which is the parabolic mirror, which can focus all of the sun's rays and give you free energy forever, as long as the sun's shining.
Yeah, so I think in summary, we want to continue, you know, doing our reach and perhaps just sharing our experiences or figuring out how we can, you know, reach other places within the country, but also share whatever we've created with other outreach groups in other parts of Africa, especially the planetarium world, because building a planetarium is very expensive. Most countries, most of our governments are not ready to spend all that money when they are dealing with hunger or other immediate problems. So sharing our affordable solution is something maybe we're going to. Sorry, you've taken a lot of time.
I just realised we've been like 10 minutes on one question.
Okay. You've actually anticipated the answer to a question from one of our locals here, Doug O'Brien, who was asking about your use of electronically assisted astronomy, but I think you've covered that. So I'll go to the next one. It's from Chris Terran, who, I don't know, what was it, 2017 or thereabouts, had an expedition to Namibia. And he says, I've observed from remote locations in Africa and was alone with my camera. I was very concerned about wildlife at night. Is it a real problem?
Oh man.
It depends. It depends where you are. So there are places where the sky is really beautiful and dark and you don't have wildlife. If you're going to Magadi and all. But most of the places we go to where we offer astrotourism experiences do have wildlife, and the astronomy experience is an add-on at night. So yes, we have had cases where, the leopard is just over there and you have to jump in the car, or we've had those experiences, and for us it's thrilling. But again, we have to be careful that our security is taken care of.
The thing is,
So,
at night,
yeah.
obviously you want to switch off all the lights to get the best view of that, exactly what your friend there has described. Of it's just you and the universe. It's like, it's bonkers, and maybe a small group of friends or a family, and it's you're in the wild, and it's the wild sky. It's not just the wild land, and that's kind of, it's like as far away as you get from the city, those two things, they just go hand in hand. So you start to sort of make more noise than you might otherwise do. I've taken to sort of stomping around the place because there have been some scary moments. There was one time a hyena chased an antelope right through the middle. We set up a little red light sort of thing in a hose pipe just so that people, like demarcation of the telescope, which works really well in sort of big groups, but it also looks kind of nice. So we started doing that. And this antelope came right through the middle of that and ran right past us. And then the hyena got close, well, maybe 10 meters, and it was like, decided we sort of shone some lights at it. But there were some lions as well. They were very close one time. But yeah, and a porcupine actually, very recently, a couple of weeks ago, we were in Laikipia, which is, for me, actually, one of the best places in Kenya to do it because it's high and dry. It's the sort of the Atacama of Kenya. This Laikipia plateau is like 2,000 meters and a bit more in places, and it's just really cool. But we were there one night, and there was this rattle as it walked by, and that was just me. It wasn't a group, and I just had my camera. I've been taking some really long exposures, and I hadn't made a sound for probably 10 minutes. You would just wait for your camera to go. And then this thing, we scared each other. It sort of looked at me because I had my red light on. It sort of like, and it sort of shivered and shook its spines, and we both ran off in opposite directions. Quite fun.
Yeah, but then again, as you said, we also offer these experiences to schools, and some of the schools you go to, like in these areas, are not boarding schools, and the kids have to go back home. But again, we talked about these communities being used to the natural world. And we've seen in our cars, an elephant not far from a human, I don't know. But
well, a lot of the lodges have got like a watering hole, which attracts all the animals. And that's also the place where we do, for the lodges anyway, we do these star nights. So those times we really do get close to lots of different.
So in summary, it's good to take care and not to get harmed by,
make noise.
All right, guys, I need to move this along. Again, my immense thanks. I hope we can repeat this in another couple of years and see where your overland adventures are going. My worst wildlife encounter was a herd of buffalo in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m, but I won't belabor that one. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. It's been great talking with you.
Hope all is good for you and the kids in your futures, and hopefully we'll be in touch again.
Thank you. And we probably are going to sign off, but we wish you an enjoyable rest of the meeting, and thanks for reaching out to us.
And I'm also jealous that you Canadians get so close to the aurora, because I've just seen an alert today. So if you get close, guys, have a look outside. You never know.
You should have been here last month, but anyway. Okay.
Oh man, I keep seeing that. It's like we're at the equator. That's the one thing we just don't get. Anyway, let me.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye.
And see you online.
Okay. Bye.
Nice to see you, mate.
Thanks, Susie. Thanks, Stu. And so now back to our regular programming. Chris. So we have 10 new members. I don't know whether any of them are online with us tonight, but if you are, welcome. 50 new members so far into the year. That's a pretty good average. And welcome to all. Next, please. I thought I'd click that one out. We just skipped that, Chris. Okay, so you may remember at our May meeting, we had a presentation concerning a group or series of groups out of Montreal who were using the Eclipse opportunity to actually gather data. And you can see there they got temperature and illumination and humidity recordings, but they also have an ongoing project to establish a measurement for the distance from the Earth to the Moon. And so, Mirage, you want to step in at this point?
You're muted.
Yes, it's okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to give me this opportunity. Yes, so I just gonna to ask for the request. So if anyone has any, can I share it on the slide? Just
you can go to the next slide, Chris, please.
Yes, I share it. Just okay. So I have it. So I appreciate it if everyone could support us regarding a couple of things. If you have the C2 and CT time, the second contact and the third contact time, as well as your geological coordination of your observation site, as well as some photos. If you have photos around 318 or 327 or 327 again, or again around 330 or 331, I appreciate if you could share them with us and send them to our email. We have an email. We create an email. Its name is, it's very easy. It's eclipseapril8@gmail.com. So as soon as we receive your images or your time, we redo our calculation and also share all those calculations. And whenever we are going to publish them, for sure, we contact you for asking your permission and everything. We respect to the copyright of every time, or let's say any photo. So I appreciate if you could share your times or your photos with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Majid. Next one, Chris. Okay, so we had a very successful star party back in May. Congratulations to Katie for organising that fabulous auroral display, and I'm sure she's got another one coming up next week, our next star party. 14th is the scheduled date, 15th is the rain date. You've also got the monthly dates through to September there, contact information and a request for volunteers, not only for the telescopes, but with traffic control. Even when there's not an aurora on, sometimes there are multiple hundreds of people there, and arranging parking and so on, it really is demanding. So anyone who can step forward to that, I'm sure Katie will appreciate it. Next one, Chris. Also, at the May Star Party, Andrea and others organised the first telescope workshop. I have to say, although Andrea would be too polite, there was quite some disappointment with the number of people who had said they would attend that to get help setting up and so on, and the number that actually showed up. For this meeting, again, it's the opportunity is there, and particularly for people with next stars, Solitron next stars, that get a hand, work out the setup, work out establishing the finder scope, getting the leveling correct, and so on. So strong invites for anyone who's having trouble with next stars to bring them along next week to the car park, get there before sunset, so we've got light to work with and so on, and hopefully get you on your way with your astronomical journey. Next one, please. Usual spiel about the benefits of membership of RASC and RASC Ottawa in particular. My big plug, the people you meet, the people that can help you, the people from whom you can learn stuff, the people with whom you can exchange ideas and ask questions. Top benefit of membership. Material benefits, we have a loan library for telescopes. Members can borrow telescopes at no cost. That's either as your intro to astronomy, or perhaps you're thinking of an upgrade. Try before you buy. We have a members-only observatory out towards Almont, the Fred Lossing Observatory. They host members-only or members and guest star parties each month. Come to the dates on that towards the end of this. The observatory is home to quite a number, I think it's 5 now, of fixed telescopes of various capacities. With some training, your members are entitled to have use of those, or you bring your own equipment. We have a media library, the Stan Mott Library, with books and DVDs. That is at Chasm. So next time we're meeting there, you can pop out the back after the meeting, talk with Estelle, and see if there's anything of interest for you there. As a RASC member, you can also participate in a variety of observer programs, some planetary, deep sky, the moon, so on and so on, and get yourself something to hang on the wall once you've met all the criteria. Next, please. As far as printed publication, so to speak, metaphorically, the bi-monthly journal of the Royal Astronomical Society. It's now distributed electronically, but you can subscribe at extra cost for the print edition. The Observer's Handbook, each year, well-renowned publication, comes to you free as part of your membership. And for Ottawa members, our own fabulous Astronautes newsletter, some monthly production with a very, very local flavour. It's a great way of keeping up with what RASC Ottawa is doing or plans to do. Next, please. Other members. There is a Discord for RASC Ottawa members. So it's a fairly informal, highly interactive communication channels with a bunch of subgroups on it, covering areas like astrophotography, visual observing, and so on and so on. Contact Andrea if you are interested in having access to the RASC Ottawa Discord server. As of last month, we also have access to the pro version, we being RASC Ottawa members, to the pro version of Astrospheric, which is a weather modeling program, particularly for cloud assessments and projections. As of today, we've got 57 members signed up. Anyone who hasn't, please contact me and I'll help you get set up either on your phone or your computer. Next up. So cost of membership, regular, a bit over $100 a year. Family memberships are available at around the same cost, plus individual add-ons for adults and youth. And as a student or anyone under 21 years old, there's a discounted membership available at about $60 a year. Next, members in the news. Andrea made it into the 2024 RASC calendar. By the way, opportunity to start ordering those should be coming up fairly soon. So there you can see she's got, it looks like Roophiakai to me on the June page for the 2025 calendar. Next, Taras Rabatsky, his beautiful shot of that prominence, that naked eye visible prominence during the eclipse. He's also made it, he's made it into the RASC journal for this month. So congratulations, Taras. And now over to Dave for Ottawa Skies for this month.
Okay, so good evening, folks. And let's take a look at what's happening in the Ottawa skies. Next slide. There we go. Thank you, Chris. Okay, so yesterday was the new moon. Full moon is on June the 22nd. The full moon was known by early Native American tribes as the strawberry moon, signaled the time of year to gather the strawberries. It also is known as the rose moon and the honeymoon. Next slide. As you can see, the days are getting longer, but of course they're going to be starting to get a little shorter as of June 21st. And yeah, we're definitely going in the right direction in terms of the length of daylight. Next slide. Mercury is not visible. It's rising and setting with the sun. Venus is visible in the early evening toward the end of the month. Mars is visible before sunrise. Jupiter is visible before sunrise. Saturn is visible before sunrise. Sorry, folks, there's not a whole lot of planets up in the evening sky. Uranus is visible before sunrise, as is Neptune. So it's a pretty well a dearth of planets for this month. And here is the cartoon of the month. So thank you very much, folks. We'll see you next month.
Thanks, Dave. Hugo, your turn. And again, my apologies for not rolling you into last month's presentations on the eclipse. Okay, Chris.
Okay, I'll make this quick and short. A little bit of a review, I guess, of our solar watch there of the eclipse. As everybody else, we debated where we should go to watch the eclipse. Initially, we thought of going to Prince Edward County, where Paul went, but then we decided that with a granddaughter with us, that might be too long a trip for us for the same day. So we thought, all right, Brockville looks pretty promising. But then that very morning, when we heard the forecast, it sounded like the clouds were moving in from the west. So just as we were getting into the car, we said, well, let's try Cornwall. That's a little further east. So that's how we ended up in Cornwall. Then when we got there, shortly before the eclipse started, you could see a nice halo around the sun due to the high cloud, which my son took with his cell phone. Next. Okay, so however, I did set up my LG 4 Lumix camera on a tripod to take a few pictures with a filter. But knowing that some of our more professional club members would get much more fantastic pictures, I didn't really take that much care. But so what I did for my camera, I simply put an Eclipse from Eclipse glasses. I put the filter of that in front of my lens, and I taped it to my polarizing filter, and then just screwed it on. And so this was just for my personal memorabilia, if you like. And so I just made a composite, and there it is. Now, next. When the totality struck, okay, I quickly thought, okay, I'll take my filter off and take some pictures at about a 1/2000 aperture, or 1/2000 second. And before I realized, in taking off my filter, because I had to unscrew it because it was on a polarizer filter, just a turn and a half or whatever, I ended up defocusing my camera. And so most of my shots are all out of focus. However, near the end, I did catch a few which were not too bad. So you can see the flares there. However, the main reason I wanted to show you what I have is the video that my son took of the audience reacting. So turn off your volume, and you'll see as the totality approaches. Chris, if you can run the video. Yeah, I don't hear anything. Do you guys have sound? I don't hear anything.
I don't hear anything
sound.
as well.
Again, sorry, Hugo.
That was the main point, to hear the audience reacting with the oohs and ahs.
Yeah, I love that about that video, and I have no idea why we're not getting the sound. So again, my apologies.
Oh, gee.
Chris, did you share sound when you did the share screen?
Yes, I did. And I'm hearing the sound, but that's in my own computer. I don't know why it's not broadcasting to Zoom.
Oh, oh boy. And I can't share it because for some reason I can't get my video going. I tried different things, but I can't. It won't start with. It just won't give it to you.
Question from Tim about
Well, I might be.
putting your microphone, Chris, up to your speaker.
Not so easy.
Not so easy. All right. Oh boy.
So I'll. No, I can't do that.
No. Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. I have it here, but I can't share the screen. So here we are.
Hugo.
We'll have to move on to the next slide.
Yeah. Go on.
Hugo, as normal with short videos, I can upload this to YouTube. Will be part of the normal post-meeting process, and the link will be available on the website. That's what I can do immediately. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right. Ah, boy. Okay, and that's it for me. Huh?
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Next, Chris, please. Okay, so now to Malcolm and his deferred presentation from April on narrowband imaging. Please take it away, Malcolm.
Okay, and all right, so you'll drive it for me if I just say next?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, this was originally going to be a couple of months ago, but circumstances pushed it out a little bit, but that's great. Originally, the title was Narrowband Astrophotography, which I thought sounded a little bit boring, so I asked my trusty ChatGPT for a better name, and it said, how about Spectral Palette, exploring the colors of narrowband astrophotography? And I thought, well, that sounds fantastic, and I guess another proof point that will soon all be replaced by AI and robots. This is one of the first narrowband images I took. It's a Crescent Nebula, and it really got me interested in both photographing these nebula, but also understanding what's going on chemically and physically with these targets. And so today in the presentation, I want to cover kind of both aspects for the first half, really focusing on what do the colors mean, what's going on physically in these nebula. And in the second half of the presentation, some tips around processing them to really get the most information out of your colors. So next, please. And as we know, kind of the excitement around narrowband and the Hubble palette in general kind of took off in April '95 when NASA published the Pillars of Creation. And I think it was great marketing to call it that. It really lit up people's imaginations. These pillars being the birthplace of stars and this new way, these new kind of colors and schemes to look at them. And that, I think, ignited interest, and along with that came, a lot of advances in accessible equipment that made it possible for amateur astronomers like us to take, Hubble-like pictures. Next, please. So this is a one slide on how do you create basically that Hubble palette. And it starts with some equipment on the left, having a monochrome camera, a black and white camera, and combining that with narrowband filters. And those filters are typically 3 specific wavelengths: hydrogen alpha, oxygen 3, and sulfur 2. And what you would do is, as shown in the picture in the image capture, the telescope images a object through each one of these filters, a sulfur filter, hydrogen alpha, and oxygen. Each of those creates a grayscale image. And then in image processing, you kind of map those grayscales to different color channels. So sulfur goes to the red channel, hydrogen goes to the green channel, oxygen goes to the blue. You combine it all and you get the so-called SHO, sulfur, hydrogen, oxygen color image, a false color image. This is a technique that uses a monochrome camera and special filters. And I know a couple months ago, Jim Thompson talked about how you can do narrowband with color cameras. That's also a legitimate approach. This is another. And if you go to the next slide, one of the reasons you might want to consider using a mono camera is basically it's higher sensitivity and better resolution. So you can kind of squeeze the ultimate amount of information out of using a monochrome camera. It has a higher quantum efficiency, which means its ability to kind of convert those photons into signal. And it doesn't have what a color camera has, which is a color filter array. And that color filter array basically restricts certain pixels to only receiving certain colors of light and then doing interpolation between all the other pixels. So with a mono camera, you just get this higher sensitivity as every pixel is able to image, every photon of light. Now, of course, the cost, the trade-off is this comes at a bit additional cost and complexity. Next, please. So that camera combined with some narrowband filters. The filters typically used, as I mentioned, are sulfur, which is images at 672 nanometers, hydrogen alpha, which is at 656 nanometers. Both of those are in the red part of the spectrum, and oxygen around 500 nanometers, which, as you can see in the diagram, is somewhere right kind of at the intersection between the typical blue and green in an RGB image. So you might want to call that kind of a teal color. So these narrowband filters are designed to isolate specific wavelengths, and those are the wavelengths that are being emitted by the celestial objects. The color palette, Hubble, is just one of many that can then be produced. So Hubble is that combination of SHO that we just talked about, but there are a variety of others, something called Fornax, where it's hydrogen, sulfur, oxygen in the red, green, blue channels, or even bicolor, which is very common, where you image just hydrogen and oxygen. And natural colors, which I'll talk about towards the end of the presentation, where you combine a narrowband image, say from hydrogen alpha, with a broadband red, green, blue image. So all kinds of combinations are possible. Next. And so what you end up getting, this is the Heart Nebula, and on the left, it is imaged in color or broadband, so RGB. And so the natural color is dominated by that hydrogen, and hydrogen is in the red part of the spectrum. So naturally, it appears, predominantly red. When you use the narrowband images, what you can do is combine them in such a way that it reveals all kinds of additional structures in a false color, in the sense that this isn't the color that your eye will see, but it is revealing information about the nebula itself. Next, please. So what are the targets that are suitable? Because you don't want to do narrowband imaging for everything. Typically, you're not going to narrowband image galaxies and planets and other things like that. Really, you're targeting emission nebula. And these are clouds of dust and ionized gases that are actually emitting specific wavelengths. Next, please. And so we see these occurring at key points in the birth and death life cycle of stars. Over on the left, we have what I'll call H2 star-forming regions, H2 being ionized hydrogen. And then these big gaseous clouds of ionized hydrogen, typically there are hot, massive stars being born, and those are creating the energy necessary to cause some of these gases to glow and emit. So they signal kind of areas where stars are being born. Later in the life cycle, there's a couple of other places. The planetary nebula is when you have a death of a star, and what it does is it sheds its outer shell of gases, may leave behind a small white dwarf star in the middle that continues to illuminate it, and you get a smaller, round, colored, emitting nebula. And these were called planetary nebulas, nothing to do with planets other than they generally appeared fairly small and round. And so I think people that first viewed them may have mistaken them as possible other planets. And the last of the three key areas are supernovas and supernova remnants. And that's when a really huge star, a red supergiant, explodes and sends a lot of its shell and gaseous material out into space. And these tend to create very intricate, filamenty kind of structures that propagate through space and create a shockwave as they move through the space. And what I want to do now is show you kind of three pictures I've taken, examples of each of these using narrowband astrophotography. So if we click onto the next one. This first is IC 1396. And this is a well-known nebula, which features the elephant trunk. It is a large faint emission nebula in constellation Cepheus, and it is a active star making region. So around that elephant trunk, there are actively stars being born, and some of these big bright stars are providing the energy to ionize those gases that we see being pushed out through the rest of the nebula. The next one. This is an example of a planetary nebula. I thought it's extremely well named as the Headphones Nebula, because when I saw that, I said, geez, that looks like a pair of headphones. It's the Jones-Emberson 1, or as we all know it, PK164 plus 31.1. And it is an example of a smaller star, probably a sun's-sized star that has shed its shell. And if you look very carefully right at the center, I believe you can see that white dwarf, or at least the remains of the white dwarf that is still fueling those emissions. Next one. And this is a well-known example of a supernova remnant. It's actually just part of a very large supernova remnant, the Veil Nebula. This is the Eastern Veil Nebula. This is imaged in HOO. So as with the previous planetary one, it was also in HOO. And so what you can see here is what I mentioned, those fine sort of interwoven filaments. And this thing is expanding out and creating a shock wave, and that shock wave is heating up the gases and continuing to cause these gases to emit. So those are the three examples. There are many different types, but of the kind of target that's suitable for narrowband imaging. Next, please. So what is going on inside these H2 regions that allows these emissions to occur? And what we have is a large gas area, and there's stars being born. And on the left, you can see very large, hot, massive, short-lived O and B type stars. These are the ones that are going to generate very high energy ultraviolet photons. Those photons are hitting the hydrogen gas that is in the cloud and causing it to photoionize, basically break apart the electrons from the protons. And so that's the ionized gas. what it wants to do, it's in a very agitated state. It wants to recombine and recreate the hydrogen atom again, and it does that. So it, yeah, there's some, I guess, some mixing up on all the letters here, some recombination and emission that occurs here. And at the recombination, the electrons are a very energetic state, and they want to relax back down to their normal state. And in so doing, they emit a photon of energy. And I'll show that in the next slide in some detail, because it defines what we mean when we say H alpha and H beta and things like that. So if we go to the next slide. On the left, you can see a model of the hydrogen molecule, and it has a variety of energy states, N1, N2, N3, N4, shown here. And when an electron is sitting at a high energy state, like an N3, it wants to fall back to N2. And when it does that, it emits a very specific wavelength of light, and that's a hydrogen alpha. So hydrogen alpha is, by definition, the transition of these electrons from N3 to N2 states when these molecules are recombining. And when it does that, it generates a very specific wavelength of light at 656 in the red, and that's the red emission line that we try to capture. Now, likewise, if an electron fell from the N4 to the N2 state, that's a higher energy transition. It would release a higher energy beta emission, so that's a hydrogen beta, and that would be down in the blue end. And so you'll get these lines, spectral lines, any of which could be captured. We tend to focus on that bright red hydrogen alpha. Next. And so if you take a look at a typical emission spectra for a nebula, you'll see, well, there's a lot more than just H alpha and H beta. There are sulfur, there's nitrogen, there's helium, there is neon, there are a variety of things. And they will all emit at very specific wavelengths. And convention has us largely focused on the sulfur, hydrogen, and oxygen. And the nomenclature here is kind of interesting because in astronomical terminology, when we say H1 over on the right side here, H1, it typically means neutral hydrogen. If we say H2, it means ionized hydrogen. If we say N2, it's ionized. S2, it's ionized. O3 means doubly ionized, so it means 2 electrons are being torn off. And what you'll often see is these N, nitrogen, sulfur, and oxygen written with square brackets around them, and that's because they were considered or are considered forbidden lines. They don't exist on Earth, and they can't be created on Earth, and so they only exist under very strange conditions that are forbidden by normal classical electromagnetic rules. But those conditions exist in nebulas. So when they were first seen, for example, oxygen 3 was thought of, it might actually be a new element which they called nebulium. Later finding out it was just a different ionized state of oxygen. So kind of an interesting history and a little reasoning behind some of the nomenclature that you may see. Next, please. So now that we know what's kind of going on, it's, what do our images reveal about these processes that are taking place? Next slide. This is a picture I took of the Heart Nebula with a nice close-up view of Merlot 15, which is in the middle. It's the running dog nebula, and there's a cluster of stars being born there. And you can see there's a lot of ionized gas. So what I thought I would do is go in here and strip out each of the layers of oxygen, hydrogen, and sulfur. And let's see if we can see some of the processes at play. So next one. So here is strictly the hydrogen alpha. And what you see is that very bright spot around the running dog is where those new stars are being formed. And that's the source of the UV radiation that's being sent out and ionizing those gases. And basically the brightness of the gases, you know, kind of just shows the extent of the ionization that's occurring. And it's very bright around those pedestals and things near where the stars are, not surprisingly, due to their proximity to those stars. If we go to the next one, oxygen, it takes a very high amount of energy to ionize oxygen. And so that's kind of providing some sort of level of proof that these are the very large O and B type stars that are required, very hot stars, to produce the type of energies necessary, the type of radiation necessary to ionize oxygen-3. On to the next. And sulfur looks somewhat similar to hydrogen, and not too surprising because it's very close to it in the spectra and it's in the red. But what it tends to do here, you can see, is really provide a nice outline of the ionization fronts. So whereas you'll get a much brighter sort of blanketing of ionization from hydrogen, with the sulfur, what you get is kind of a detailing of the edges, which turns out to work wonders with your photos. So if we go to the next slide and take a look at hydrogen on the left, you can see that right where the ionization meets the neutral hydrogen, you'll get something called a photoevaporative flow, which basically says, okay, this ionized gas is heating up and trying to expand, and it expands away from the cool gas back into the ionized area. So you get this nice bright outline. That occurs very distinctly with sulfur. And one of the reasons that happens is that when sulfur is ionized, it's actually more easily ionized as sulfur-3, which reacts when it encounters that neutral hydrogen gas. And as a result, anywhere that sulfur-3 encounters the gas, in other words, all the edges, it will start to ionize and cause that emission. And so if we go to the next slide, I've combined the hydrogen alpha and the silicon, and then we can start to see the Hubble effect. When you bring them together, you get that beautiful orange color. And beyond what you see in just the hydrogen alpha, that sulfur starts to detail all kinds of structure in the cloud right along that ionization edge from the processes that we just talked about. And so that's one of the reasons that these images show such incredible detail when you take them. All right, next slide, please. So that's kind of the where I wanted to leave it in terms of the processes. You know, it's very interesting that the colors do represent, you know, physical and chemical processes. Now the question is, how do you generate process images so that it accurately reflects what's going on? And that's in the image processing side. So next slide, please. What I show here is a typical processing workflow. After the initial calibration of your light frames, you'll have calibrated SHO frames. Normal processing, you would remove gradients from these and then combine them together into a single SHO image. That SAO image, and this is the key if you're getting into narrowband, this is the key place to focus, is what do you do about color calibration? The challenge most people have with narrowband is getting the colors that they see in things like the Hubble palette reproduced in the images that they take. And a lot of that is addressed in proper color calibration, which I'll talk about in some detail. Once things are color calibrated, the image can be stretched into its nonlinear phase, and then can be taken through a normal set of processes, such as, you know, affecting brightness, contrast, noise, and these kind of things. But I want to focus on really the color calibration aspect, and if we have time, a little bit about correcting star colors, because narrowband does some very odd things with stars. Next slide, please. So here's what you might see the very first time you combine that SHO image. You have a linked screen stretch, means everything has been kind of stretched on the screen to the same extent, not independently. And it looks like, uh-oh, everything has gone wrong. Something's crazy. But don't panic, this is normal. This is what it will typically, something like this is how an image will first look. And what I did is, for each of these images that I'm going to show, I plotted the statistics related to each of the channels to show what was going on in the brightness levels between the sky background and the nebula itself. And what we see here is when you first combine things, the sky background will tend to dominate all others and wash out your entire picture. So one of your channels, in this case, the oxygen channel, has a very intense sky background value that's washing the picture out. So step number one on the next slide is that you neutralize the background. And background neutralization is typically a software function in whatever program it is. I use PixInsight, but there should be something similar in any other program. And it's used to balance the background color, removing any dominant hues. You basically want to take the pedestal out of the background and even it out before you do color balancing. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see there's that horrible picture on the left. You go and identify a background area, an area that is sky background and not nebula. Sometimes it's difficult when there's a lot of nebula in the image to decide exactly what that is. And I'll point out, if you are using PixInsight, there's just been introduced something called Fine Background, a script by SETI Astro that does a great job of just identifying where is the background, sky background on your image. And what the neutralization will do, if you look at the chart on the bottom, is it will neutralize out and even out all of that background so that now the nebula itself is the thing that dominates the picture. And your picture suddenly goes, oh my God, it's still wrong, it's all green. Well, that's logically because we've assigned hydrogen alpha, the most dominant color, to the green channel, so it is dominating. So the next step, if we go to the next one, is the color calibration. And here we do something a little different. Every image, regardless of broadband or narrowband, needs to be color calibrated. And with broadband, we are used to doing things like SPCC. Again, if you're working with PixInsight, it's basically using an external reference, like a spiral galaxy, to say that's what should be a neutral color. And then we use photometry and star catalogs to try and match our images. With narrowband, we don't have to do any of that. We just use the image itself and balance out the red, green, and blue channels within the image so that their intersection is effectively a neutral white. So if we go to the next slide, you can see on the left again, now there's my background neutralized image. And after doing a background, after doing a white balance on the nebula itself, it will even out all those tones, and suddenly what we have is that SHO color. So the beauty of this is you are really just allowing each of the colors to show through in their kind of their natural state, while having a very suppressed background, sky background. And you get those nice colors. The final step, if I go to the next one, is where you can get artistic and you can sort of tweak those levels. Now that everything is balanced and color calibrated, and if we go to the next slide, you can, through some simple math, start to tweak those orange bars up or down, depending on what kind of color effect you ultimately are looking for. And remember, all of this is still happening while it's in its linear state. We haven't taken it yet into the non-linear stretch and done other things like saturation and all that. One thing I will say here is that what I've seen very often from YouTubers and things like this is a suggestion that with narrowband, the first thing you should do is a linear fit function for all of your images. I don't recommend this. That's not a color calibration. It will lead you to a somewhat more balanced image, but it's really doing something different. And I'd recommend sort of following a neutralization calibration to get the best kind of results. I just want to check on time because the next section I could skip a few slides unless we're doing okay.
Malcolm, if you can keep it moving along briskly, I think you're fine.
Okay, all right. Yeah, it's not 10 minutes more, maybe at the most.
Go for it.
So if we look at the next slide. Next. One of the interesting things that happens when you color calibrate is that the stars go crazy. So before color calibration, I've done the neutralization. Everything looks good. It's very green. The stars are white. After color calibration, naturally what I've done is I've balanced the red and the green, or I've increased those values. Combination of red and blue is magenta, and the stars start to exhibit this very magenta color. It's very easy to correct this. If you go to the next slide, fortuitously, the inverse of magenta in the color scale is green. So you can invert your image like this. And in the next slide, basically, once you invert it, then just desaturate some of that green. You can use something like an SCNR function in PixInsight, or just turn down the saturation on the green. And then when you invert it back again, that magenta color has been resolved. So it's kind of a trick, but it's a simple way to address the fact that the colors take on an unnatural look through that calibration because of the fact that both the red and blue channels have been boosted. All right, next. The last thing I want to talk about is the ability to mix narrowband and broadband, or in other words, to add hydrogen alpha to an RGB color image. There's a couple things you can do. Looking at the next slide, if you really like that natural red toned sort of natural color image taken with color, you can take that, and then if you use hydrogen alpha as your luminance layer, so substituting hydrogen alpha, which provides a lot of detail, and just use it as the luminance, you will retain that natural color, but the hydrogen alpha will bring out a lot of that structural detail that you wouldn't otherwise see in the image. So a really nice way to sort of bring detail into a natural color image is by using hydrogen alpha as your luminance layer. Next one. This is very common. You will see beautiful galaxies with lots of the red, pink, and red hydrogen 2 areas highlighted. And so here we're highlighting these hydrogen 2 regions. If you think about all the nebulas that we see throughout that we image throughout the Milky Way, well, there are similar kind of nebulas in those distant galaxies as well. We won't see the detail, but we will see the red coloring of where those hydrogen 2 regions exist. And so this would be, this is a fairly involved capture because it's involving typically 5 filters. You'll take an LRGB image and then as well hydrogen alpha, and then combine the two so that you bring that hydrogen to cause those hydrogen 2 levels to pop in your LRGB image. And the best way to do this, if you go to the next slide, is through a process called continuum subtraction. And what that is about is if you look on the left and you say, okay, that is a picture of my filter bandpass, the hydrogen emission line is a very discrete line. My bandpass is actually wider than that. So I am actually going to be capturing some neighboring red light as well as just that emission line. And that's naturally because stars nearby are emitting red light. And so the image that you see in the middle there would be a hydrogen alpha before subtraction. But if you are able to subtract out all that continuum, you are left ultimately with just the hydrogen alpha. And that's really the piece that you want to combine with your image to create that, to have those areas pop on the in the galaxy. So on next slide. The way that would look is across the top, you would have an LRGB, a color image of a galaxy. You will have created this hydrogen layer with the continuum subtracted. And it starts with a hydrogen image that probably has that continuum that you have to remove. And here again, there are scripts like the well-named continuum subtraction utility that will do that removal. So you have just that pure hydrogen, you blend it in, and then you get that image with a nice pop of the colors of the hydrogen regions in the galaxy. And for my very last slide, I wanted to show you where I did something like this with the M82 starburst, and you can really see the effect that HA brings. On the left, it was 2 hours each of red, green, and blue of the galaxy. But then I added another 7.5 hours of that hydrogen. I did the continuum subtraction, layered it on, and you can really see the starburst effect of that hydrogen by layering those two on together. So it can be a very powerful kind of effect. And that, I think, is the end. Appreciate the time. And if there's time, I can take any questions.
All righty. Thanks, Malcolm. And first up, apologies that some of the text was misformatted. I've been looking into it. I'm not sure why, but we'll get to the bottom of it. Secondly, I should have said in the intro that your presentation was meant to have segued from Jim Thompson's presentation the previous month about doing SHO on the cheap. So I'm curious whether Jim or any of his gang there has got questions. Oh, and I see one has just popped up from Oscar, Oscar Echeverry, asking, how do you combine the hydrogen alpha into the LRGB image?
The way I do it is with a pixel math script, not a script, but with pixel math. And so basically, I could provide, what that math is, but it is sort of a mathematical addition of the two. So you're just taking one layer and then in pixel math, adding it into the other layer. I think if you've got a very dark sort of clipped background, it could be possible to just to add the two. But this technique takes into account evening out the median backgrounds as well. So off the top of my head, I don't know but I can put it into the Discord if you're interested. All
righty. And with that, I don't see any other immediate questions. I'm sure you're going to get
Jim. Hey, this is Boyan here with Jim. For someone who's never taken photos like this before, are you in the city taking these photos? Are you outside of town? How much of a dark sky do you need to get those types of pictures?
Great question, because I forgot to mention that it's one of the beauties of narrowband is that you are not as constrained to dark skies as you would be with color. And that's naturally just because you are taking fine, discrete wavelengths that are being emitted, and you're rejecting most of the other light, which would be sky background or sky pollution, the moon, things like that. So I'm photoing all of these photos that I've shown here, including this one that we're looking at, were taken from my backyard in Canada. And they can be taken even on a moonlit night. It's obviously preferable for a dark sky, but the beauty is that you're taking such narrow bands that most of that light pollution is being omitted.
All righty. Chris, do you see anything else?
Nope.
Okay, so with that, I will say thank you, Malcolm. There was way more detail there than I really could parse, but I'm sure Jim and his gang and the other images out there are grateful. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Chris, we can skip this. We can skip the next one. Okay, so 5-minute bio break, and the question for our trivia challenge is how many moons in the solar system are larger than our moon? And for bonus points and a gold star, name them. So. Alrighty. So next slide, please. So there are 4 moons in our solar system larger than Earth's own moon, those being Ganymede, Titan, Callisto, and Io. And I don't know whether we got any responses, but we didn't. Anyway, no one gets the gold star. So next, please. Over to you, Richard. And
okay. Well, good evening. This is my update to a previous web page that I produced for the Ottawa RASC back in 1998. And it's also a bit of a personal record of my own eclipse experiences. I caught the eclipse bug way back in 1973 when I was about 17 years old. I took an eclipse cruise to the coast of Africa, just off Dakar, Senegal. And I didn't have a lot of fancy equipment at that point, and most of it was borrowed. So the pictures that I took of that eclipse don't work very well for any post-processing. They were all film camera, of course, and very, very small on the eventual prints that I made. But then in 1998, I took my family on another eclipse cruise into the Caribbean, and that one was the most interesting one because it was just at the beginning of digital image processing, and that's what I want to be talking about tonight. Then in 2016, I was on a very fantastic adventure down in Indonesia on another eclipse cruise, and we stopped over in Borneo as well. It was a wonderful holiday, but my eclipse pictures didn't really turn out very well. Unfortunately, I only had a telephoto lens, and I think I must have bumped the focusing when I took the filter off, so my pictures of totality were a little bit blurry. And then, of course, there was the most recent eclipse on April 8th of this year. And this one, I think I've got my best pictures yet because I was land-based and I had better equipment for that one. Next slide. So here's the website that I produced way back in 1998. I called it Chasing the Perfect Eclipse Picture because not only did I go chasing the eclipse down into the Caribbean, but I also spent weeks and weeks afterwards trying to figure out the techniques for image processing that would recreate in the picture what I had actually seen with my eyes. And that's been my goal all along, is to try to recapture the experience of being there. And it's a very, very difficult thing because our eyes are fantastic imaging tools, and no camera could really do it justice. And similarly, the way we have of displaying photographs is quite limited compared to what our eyes are actually capable of seeing. Anyway, back in 1998, I was, let's go on to the next slide. I was basically restricted to using single lens reflex cameras with manual controls. That's what I was using for my astrophotography at the time. And telephoto lenses, Kodak film and Fuji film. The ISO 1000 was about the fastest easily available film at the time. And trying to digitize them was a big problem at that point. I did have one of the early scanners, but it was not very good quality. Eventually, I did send it away for a commercial digitization, but at that point, usually film images were only digitized at 8 bits per color per pixel, 256 levels. And it was also fairly costly. The home desktop computers of the time were quite slow by modern standards and had very limited memory and disk space, especially if you wanted to transfer. They were starting to put out CDs that you could have, read-writable CDs. So that's where I backed up my images eventually. And then, of course, internet access was slow and putting big images on web pages was discouraged. I guess, Mick, that's what we're still doing, isn't it? And then the tools I was using, Corel Draw and Corel Photo Paint, those were the big names, especially here in Ottawa for image processing at the time. Remember the Corel Center? You hardly ever hear about Corel anymore. And when I came back to my 1998 pictures, I did have a bit of a problem trying to find something that would read and write the Corel formats. Next one, please. So trying to figure out how to do digital image processing in 1998, I was set on my way by this article in Sky and Telescope magazine from the January 1998 issue, just as I was getting ready to go to this February eclipse in the Caribbean. And this was quite fascinating to me because it gave me some ideas about what I could do to, as he says, improve the quality of the pictures taken from the deck of a rolling ship, which is exactly what my situation was going to be. Next one, please. So the idea that came out of that Sky and Telescope article, the main technique that I thought was quite interesting and innovative at the time was trying to get the radial streaks, the features in the corona highlighted by producing a rotationally blurred copy of my image and then subtracting the two to bring out those details. So that was the basic idea of the technique. The other thing that sort of resonated with me was that at the time, other people were talking about using a radially gradient filter. So something that was dark in the center where the corona was going to be the brightest, and then getting less and less dark as you go out towards the edges. But those kinds of filters were very, very expensive and very difficult to use as well, because you'd have to center it on the sun. So this digital technique promised to give the same kind of effect of smoothing out the gradient of lightness in the corona and enabling me to see the details. So this is where I started with my image processing, taking the scanned images, blurring them, rotating and blurring, which the the Corel Photo Paint could do, and then subtracting the two. Now, the image up there in the upper right is practically invisible, but that is the difference between the two. So it's a negative image because you've subtracted. And when you invert it, then you get the positive image and you can stretch it. But you see, although it's got lots of detail in it, it also has an awful lot of noise. So there had to be a few more steps in here. Next picture, please. So I had to learn a number of other techniques. One of them was trying to align and stack images. So I could take multiple images with different exposures and try and bring out the best features of each one. And in this area, I found that once I'd done the subtraction and had this negative image, I could just add them up. And that would enhance the detail and combine the features of all the different exposures quite well. So I was very happy with that idea. The other idea, of course, was trying to create what's called a high dynamic range image. trying to get more visible effects from the different exposures. The camera, of course, only gets a piece of what you're seeing. It can't capture the entire range, especially not only working with 256 levels of brightness. So I had to take many different exposures and then try and add them up. And this is where adding the negative images worked quite well. Their limitation of, as I keep mentioning, was between 0 and 255 or 256 levels of brightness. And it was very difficult to keep your values of the pixels in that range. It was either going overflowing into something greater than 255, which couldn't be represented, or going less than 0, which again could not be represented. I've mentioned already the difficulties of transforming film images into digital images. There was also a tremendous difficulty in the slow processing of at the time. We only had one computer for the whole family. My daughters wanted to use it for their schoolwork. My wife wanted to use it for her hobbies. And I was monopolizing it for doing image processing. And then finally, there was the difficulty of trying to show my pictures afterwards, taking a digital file and showing it to other people. Trying to get a print made from a digital image at that time was also quite difficult. And then there was the perennial difficulty of cloudy days. Next one, please. So after many, many weeks of combining and processing and trying to get out the best of all of the pictures I'd taken, this was my best finished product of 1998. And I did eventually print it on an inkjet printer of my own. And as you can imagine, it used up a large quantity of the black and the blue inks. But anyway, I was quite happy with the way that came out. But I kind of put it on the back burner and didn't do anything more for many, many years afterwards. Next one, please. So 2024, this year, I really wanted to bring the ideas back again and see what I could do with much better equipment these days. So some of the transformations that have taken since 1998 to 2024, I now have a digital camera. And it directly digitizes my images. I don't have to worry about film. And it can digitize things at 14 bits for each pixel for each color. That is 16,000 different levels of brightness. Much, much improved over 256 levels. I also now use a proper refractor telescope with a field flattener and a fine focus knob instead of the telephoto lens. That really made a difference in terms of trying to get a good focus and a good size of image on the sensor. This time I was land-based, so I didn't have to worry about the rolling of the ship and vibrations from the engines and that kind of thing. And my computer these days is much, much faster than what I had at the time, and there's a lot of software available. So for this example, I used mainly the free image processing software called GIMP. So the processing was much faster, but the overall process still took several weeks because I was tempted to try a whole bunch more options. I wanted to, play around with a number of different factors involved. And, it always seems to take up all the available time that I have. The frustration, of course, is still that I can't display the same range of brightness that the human eye can see. When I'm displaying on a computer screen, screens are still limited to those 256 levels of brightness for each color, for each pixel. So you do have to do some adjustments to try and put on the screen the whole range of brightness that's available in the corona. Next one, please. So I'm going to go through in a little bit more detail the steps involved that I followed this time. using the GIMP software, and this is one of its add-on packages called Raw Therapy. Raw Therapy has all of the image format reading capabilities, so it can take raw pictures from a variety of different proprietary camera formats. So this is what I use to get my Canon raw images into the GIMP image processing software. And while you're in raw therapy, you can do some of the initial image processing. So I've taken a single picture from the camera, and if you look down at the lower right-hand corner of the screenshot there, you'll see the histogram of this image. And most of the data is way down at the dark end of the levels. So I've applied a sort of a boosting process to increase the brightness of the darker areas and not change the brighter areas as much. So this is one of the steps that compensates for the fact that the corona has a very wide range of brightness, and you want to be able to display it in a more uniform fashion. Next, please. So once I've boosted the brightness of the dim areas, then I bring it into GIMP, and I want to make it centered on the sun. I'm going to be applying this rotational blurring process, so I want it symmetrical about this very center of the sun and moon. So in this process, I would actually use my cursor to put it at the edge of the moon, left, right, up, down, and measure the pixel locations of those points on the edge of the moon and sun. And then find the average of them to find the exact center of the sun and moon. And then draw a square around it and crop it to that particular square. Next one. Then using the filters, the blurring filters and the circular motion blurring in particular, I had a couple of parameters to choose. One is the center, which I left. Now I've got the image centered on the square. I left that at 50-50, right in the middle. And then I had the amount, the angle of blurring. So this is as if you're taking the image and twisting it by a certain angle. And you can see on the middle of the screen there that a 10-degree blur is a fairly small amount. But that was where I was told to start by the old Sky and Telescope magazine article. And so that's where I started here. I'll show some of the effects of changing that later on. Next one. Now, we still have the problem that if we subtract the natural image from the blurred image, there's a possibility that we could go off the negative end. We could get negative values. So to avoid that happening, I would boost the brightness of the blurred image first before doing the subtraction process. Now, this turns out to be also something that will affect the range of the values in the output as well. So this is another parameter that can be changed, and it has a definite effect on the final quality. So here I have boosted the output levels. If you look about halfway down the screen, the output levels I've changed to go from 20% up to 100% instead of from 0 to 100%. And that overall brightens the image. You can see that the center of the moon now is not black anymore. It's got a definite gray shade. Next, please. Then we paste the original image on top of the blurred image. And when you paste another image on top of one, you have layers. And you can control how those layers are going to be combined. And one of the ways you can have it combined is take the difference of them. So that's what I've done here. You can see the controls down on the left side of the screen there. And by choosing the difference, we get this negative image. But you can already see that the corona does seem to have quite a bit more detail now, even though it's in the negative form. So next one. When you invert it, then you get the bright image again, and it's all going to be up in the top 20% of the pixel range now. So you have to adjust the brightness so that the input levels go from 80% up to 100%. That will compensate for what you did earlier of changing the output range from 20% to 100%. Now, this does reduce the number of grayscales that you're operating with, and that's why it's really helpful to have the 16-bit, the 14-bit grayscale of the digital camera. You get a much smoother result from doing it this way. So that is the initial image processing to get this radial features emphasized and highlighted in your product. Next one, please. Now, I said that you can play around with how much you do the rotational blur, and this has a definite impact on your final product. So I've tried 3 different values for the rotational blur here. The first one on the left is a 3-degree blur. And you can't really see much difference from the original on that, but if you look really, really closely, you'll see that there's a lot of fine detail showing up there. The 10-degree blur seems to come out with a very nice aesthetic effect. It's got some of the smaller features, but also some of the bigger features highlighted nicely. The 20-degree blur ignores the fine detail, but really highlights the bigger radial streaks in the corona. So at this point, it's a matter of choosing what you think you want to show in your final picture. You've got all of these different possibilities. However, you can combine them. And again, using this idea of adding up the difference images, the negative images, you can actually combine multiple levels of detail by combining some different degrees of the rotational blur. Next one, please. Now, the other thing that you can play around with is how much offset you add to the blurred image, and that affects what range of pixel values you're going to have in your final product. If you choose a 5% boost, then you're going to get really very emphasized radial features, but it's going to be very noisy. This is because you don't have as much gray levels to work with, brightness levels to work with. The 20% range is what I tried to begin with, and I think that works out as a nice balance. Maybe it's a little bit not detailed enough. So there's a trade-off here between how much detail you're going to show and how much noise you're going to get in your image. By the time you get up to a 40% range, it's not really doing very much. So I wouldn't go that far. But again, you have to sort of try things out and see what works best. Next one, please. Oops. I'm missing some slides there.
Hold one sec, Richard. I'm not sure. Just running through.
I could show it on
Yeah, switch to your desktop.
just a moment. Let me bring it up here. Can I share my screen now?
You should be able to.
Okay. Are you seeing it?
Yes, we see your screen now.
Okay.
Okay, sorry about that, Richard. We'll look into that
Okay,
problem.
that's where I was with changing with the offset and range. So these are the things that I've learned about this process, is that if you choose the different amount of rotation in your blur, then you're going to change the size of the details that are enhanced. So a small degree of rotation gives you really, really fine detail. 10 degrees worked fairly well, I thought. And then as you increase it, you get more and more bigger features in the corona. The ranges, when you choose the offset, the output level by boosting the levels in the blurred image, that's going to have an effect on the amount of noise, and it's going to change how strongly the features are emphasized. Now, the other thing that I haven't talked about too much, and I don't plan on doing so too much, is the idea of stacking. We all know that from other image processing that if you have a single image, you're going to get a fair degree of noise. But as you increase the number of pictures you add up, you're going to decrease the amount of noise. So now we have the opportunity of taking lots of pictures very quickly. We can stack up a number of pictures and get less noise, and that will reduce the effect of the previous step. I've mentioned the adding of negative difference images. The one thing that this doesn't work on is the prominences. So the prominences are not in the corona, they're in the chromosphere, and they're a different color, and they're a different shape. So they just get destroyed by this process that's intended to emphasize the radial streaks in the corona. So I went back and added them in afterwards. So after many weeks, as I say, of playing around with this, what I came up with was using a combination of several different blur rotations, 3, 5, 8, 12, and 16 degrees, and using them with a 16% range rather than 10 or 20. I came in halfway between. And then I took the original stacked image and added the prominences directly back in from that. So a lot of manipulations going on, but I'm pretty happy with the result. So this is the 2024 April 8th eclipse. You've got lovely detail in the corona. You've got the prominences still there. I'm really happy with that. But it could be better, you know. I keep thinking that, you know, I should have had a shorter photo length and been able to get more wispy details in the outer corona. I totally missed getting an exposure that showed the Earth light on the moon's surface. So I'll just have to go back and see another eclipse. Or the other thing, go back and revisit my old images. So here's another copy of the best picture that I had from 1998. When you zoom in on the eclipsed sun, you see that it's got a fair bit of noise in there. So I went back, re-looked at all of my original images, restacked them, reprocessed them using the larger bit depth now, and this is the result. Not a big deal of difference. I'm still pretty happy with what I did in 1998, but the new one shows a little bit more subtle shading and a prominence right there. I didn't realize I'd captured before. So you bring out details in old pictures as well. My 2016 pictures, I thought they were spoiled. I didn't think I'd done very well at all. They were all blurry. Well, they are still kind of blurry around the rim here, but the details in the corona can still be brought out. So again, quite happy with how I could reprocess my 2016 Eclipse pictures. So I encourage everybody, if you want to try this out, it's not that difficult to do. The tools are free. GIMP is a free software, or most of the other things like Photoshop have the same kind of tools available. Whatever you've got, just try these steps and see if you can get something to process your own Eclipse pictures. And then, of course, there's the aurora. Can we do anything with an aurora picture? I was originally thinking that, maybe because the streaks are this way, I could have a motion blur filter going in this direction. Didn't work. It was a mess. It turned out that the unsharp masking that I talked about in one of my previous talks was the better choice. But the features are extremely large in an aurora, and things that you want to emphasize are very big things. So when using the unsharp mask, I had to set the radius of the blur again much bigger than I normally would. So this was at a 40 pixel radius for the blurring. And I think that has done a nice job of not only emphasizing some of these streaky features in the aurora, but also the patterns in the clouds as well. So there's always things you can do with your pictures. I do try and make it show what my eye saw, but it's a lot of aesthetics here as well. You have to make your choices and you can get some very beautiful results. Thank you, that's all.
Alrighty, thank you, Richard. Again, way more detail than I'm competent to deal with, but thank you very much. Well, thank you also for the crack about image sizes. That will be a never-ending tussle between what images want and what system capacities are. So there we go. I don't see any immediate questions for you. Again, I'm sure you'll get lots on the Discord.
I'm on Discord, and there is an article in last month's Astro Notes outlining this process as well.
Yeah.
So if you want to read up for it in detail, it's there.
So again, thank you very much. And now we're off on our journey of observation report.
Are we ready for Bob?
Over to you, Bob.
This is going to be pretty boring. This open cluster of stars is about 3,000 light years distant. It covers an area in the sky just slightly larger, smaller than the moon. It is somewhat difficult to tell which stars are part of the cluster and which stars are just in the same line of sight. But there appear to be about 400 likely members of the cluster. The little cluster at the top of the right image is NGC 2158. It is at least 8,000 light years further away than M35 and is about 2 billion years old. And this was one of the challenge objects. Next slide, please. M40 is the double star in the middle of the image. This is the most boring object in the Messier list. Charles Messier's catalog was meant to be a list of objects in the sky that appeared to be comets, but because they didn't move, were not comets. This meant that if you were searching for comets and came across one of these objects, it could be eliminated as a possible comet. I always assumed that his telescope optics were not great, or the seeing that night was very bad, and that he mistook this pair of stars as a faint fuzzy. But apparently he did know it was a double star. The two galaxies under M40 are too dim for Messier to have seen with his telescope. Next image. The Ring Nebula is one of the first objects that I observed with my telescope. Therefore, it has a warm spot in my heart. It is very close to the star Vega, making it very easy to find. Next, please. The Tiger's Eye galaxy. This is also a challenge object. This galaxy is about 46 million light years distance. It contains about 70 billion stars. Part of the nucleus of the galaxy is rotating in a reverse direction. This suggests that NGC 2841 has, at some time in the past, collided with a smaller galaxy. Next image, please. This globular cluster is a gorgeous telescope target. If you have a chance to see it with a telescope, do so. It is about 27,000 light years distance. Next image, please. This is also a challenge object, and I could find nothing on the galaxy other than it has an active galaxy nucleus. Next slide, please. This close-up view does look interesting with all the intersecting dust lanes. Next, please. The Bubble Nebula is a hydrogen alpha emission nebula in the constellation Cassiopeia. The hot young central star has blasted the nebula away, creating the bubble. The central star is 44 times the mass of our sun. The bright star below the bubble is much closer to Earth than the bubble and has no effect on the bubble nebula except to blind you when you're trying to observe the bubble visually. The bubble is somewhere between 7,000 and 11,000 light years distance. Thank you very much.
All righty. Thank you, Bob. So over to Jim Sofia now, one of the Jims and the gang.
The Jims. Okay, thank you. Now, how do we get rid of that? You want to, there we go. Okay, we got it. Okay, occasionally I experience solar imagers online that demonstrate techniques to enhance the detail of the image they caught taking the chromosphere of the sun. So the whole idea was how can we get a little bit more detail from the chromosphere? So I'd like to show you the result of one approach that I saw that I've been practicing. So this is a stacked monochrome image that I took using the Lund 60mm H-alpha scope with the ZWO ASI 174 camera, showing some surface detail of the sun. Next one, please. Another way of presenting this image is to actually, it's quite over-processed, I think, in this case. So this image, what I did was I manipulated the tone curve editor of the histogram in the program IMPPG, which is a popular program for solar processing. And it's also a free program. And by a series of manual adjustments to the shape of the curve, you can invert the solar surface light. And you can also highlight the light given off by the visible prominences. And this only takes a couple of minutes with some practice. Plus, adding some color from Affinity Photo 2 and the new resulting contrast in the image may make certain details or textures or patterns more revealing. Can you go back one, please? Okay, so that was the first image, and I'll go forward again one more time. Thank you. Of course, there's always a subjective element to this sort of thing, but the method really caught my eye. Next one, please. So this is another image showing a close-up of an active region of intense magnetic activity with two sunspots, one more prominent than the other, within a huge plage, which is the white area that you see that form part of the network of bright emissions that characterizes the chromosphere. Next one, please. And here is the modified version using the same approach as before. Some areas appear to pop, like magnetic field lines and filaments. I also notice more visible detail as you get closer to the periphery of the sun's disk. Now, would you mind just going back again? Okay, so that was the original monochrome image, and now go forward, please. And so this is just another way that you can increase the contrast of a solar image. Some images tend to work better with this approach than others. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jim, or one of the Jims, whichever you were.
All right.
And now Tony.
Okay. Thanks, Mick. Hi, everyone. So my report this month is based on the image on the screen that I took last month at Flow. I was inspired by Richard's Galaxy Challenge. So I looked around the Virgo cluster and found these two nice spiral galaxies that fit into my field of view. So M100 is up at the top left, and M99 is down at the bottom right. The details are up there at the bottom of the image. It's almost 2 hours of exposure with the Starfield Optics quad 60mm telescope. But there are more than just two galaxies here. If you hit the next image, then you'll see highlighted some of the obvious other galaxies and some of the less obvious ones.
I think
pretty much all of the named galaxies are in the Virgo cluster. So they're about 40 to 60 million light years away. And presumably many of the much smaller ones are even further away. Let's see. And I think when I started counting, I got pretty close to 100 on this image. So if you go to the next slide, there's a closer look at M99. And as my telescope camera was doing its thing, I went over to the 18-inch Star Master and did a little visual observing and did a quick sketch. It's nothing special, but it's interesting for me to try and work out how well I did. And I think I got some of the stars in the right place. And I should point out that I didn't see any of the spiral structure in the galaxy, even if my scribble looks a bit circular. Okay, next slide. So I did the same thing with M100. I just learned earlier that M100 is also known as the mirror galaxy. And I think that's because when the Hubble mirror was being fixed, this galaxy was one of the ones that was used as the test subject for the mirror upgrade. It's also apparently a bit of a mirror image of our own galaxy. So there's two reasons it might be known as the mirror galaxy. And there you can see my little sketch. I'm glad that I found that side-on galaxy in the top left, but I think my stars need a little bit of work. And on the final image, I've got no sketch, but I just highlighted this little pair of galaxies at the bottom of my image. I don't have quite enough focal length to do them justice, but they're such an odd pair that I thought it was worth taking another look. And these are two galaxies that are interacting gravitationally and there's some odd things going on. You can just about see some dark lanes in the side-on galaxy, which would look pretty nice with a little bit more focal length. So I'll leave that to someone else maybe next year. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Tony. All right, and now to one of the other gyms.
Yes, we got the gyms all together here tonight. It's safer for everyone that way. Okay, good evening, everyone. For me, this past month has been a productive one for astronomy. Most notable event, of course, being the aurora on May 10th. That night, I had headed up to my cottage in Sheemborough, Quebec, across the Ottawa River from Petawawa to get the cottage opened up for the season. I had seen the forecasts and knew there was a chance of an aurora that night, so I had brought my Canon M3 camera along, a tripod, and a Rokinon 8mm fisheye lens. This animated GIF shows a sequence of images taken shortly after I had headed outside to check to see if something was going on, around 10 p.m. The images were captured on an approximately 1-minute interval, and the field of view provided by the fisheye lens is about 109 degrees wide by 86 degrees high. You can see that very quickly, the aurora went from faintly visible to very bright and filling the entire sky. The aurora was so bright, the ground was lit up like it was a full moon out. You could see clearly. And that was despite the fact that it was partly cloudy, as you can see in these images. So it was a pretty amazing event. By the way, these images were captured while I was looking south, not north, south. Pretty wild. Next, please. The second image shows one of the other amazing aspects of the event, the colors. In this one shot, we can see all of the known colors that can be produced in an aurora. To say this was an energetic event is an understatement. You can see my wife Anne-Marie in this image frantically texting all of her friends, telling them to get outside now. All of the aurora images shown, by the way, were taken at f3.5 focal ratio, ISO 800, and 4-second exposures. Next image, please. My next opportunity to observe was on Sunday, May 19th. These solar images were captured from my backyard in central Ottawa. Each image is a composite of different exposures to capture the surface detail and the prominences. And then they were combined after. I captured 4,000 frames for each, stacking the best 200 frames in AutoStacker 3 and sharpening in IMPPG. I capture a lot of frames, you may have noticed, because the seeing in the city is terrible. Of note are the very large and bright prominences in the lower hemisphere of the sun. They were so bright, in fact, that they were visible in calcium K. You can see that ring on the left side is visible in the left image. And that's pretty noteworthy because that is not a common occurrence for the prominences to be bright enough to see in calcium K. So that was pretty cool. Next slide, please. Later the same day, I had an opportunity to do some lunar observing, something that I had not done for a long while. This is a capture from the lunar North Pole region. I found great enjoyment exploring this part of the moon and reminiscing about the Bailey's beads that we all saw when we observed the April eclipse, a direct result of the mountains and valleys found in this part of the moon. Perhaps one of our other local lunatics, like Paul Klauninger perhaps, could do a presentation on what specific lunar features caused this past April's beads. Next slide, please. My next opportunity to observe was on Friday, May 24th. I started the evening out by collimating my Ritchie-Chrétien scope using a newly procured Tri-Batonov mask. This mask made collimating the scope a breeze. Thank you to our member who brought it to everyone's attention. I think it was maybe Richard Taylor, but I'm not positive. The rest of the evening was spent chasing down spring galaxies, as you can see captured here. Starting at the top left, I observed NGC 4449, M51, M101, M83, M63, M106, M107, and NGC 4631. As the session stretched on into the early morning hours, some of my favorite summertime objects began to appear as well, like M57, M27, NGC 6888, and NGC 6995. These images are all live stacks of 30 20-second frames captured from my Bortle 9+ backyard in the middle of Ottawa. The monochrome images were captured using the 10-inch RC scope with a Mellencam DS432 camera and a IR high-pass filter. The color images were captured using a 98mm refractor with a ZWO ASI 533 camera and Antlia quad-band ALP filter. What made this evening even more enjoyable was the fact that I was joined virtually via Zoom by my observing friends Simon, Jim, Waldo, and Lance. We enjoyed the sky together, even though we were many miles apart. And then my last slide, please. My final observation for this month is of the sun again, made on Saturday, June 1st. I captured images of the whole solar disk, but I wanted to zoom in tonight on this particular sunspot group. It is of the active region 3664 that caused spectacular auroras last month. The group has made a full rotation of the sun and is now facing the Earth again. It has been given a new name, active region 3697, and it is still relatively active, shooting off several X-class flares over the past week. Stay tuned for another possible aurora in the coming week or so. In fact, there is an alert tonight for a mild one, as we could see another big show if we're lucky as a result of this group. These images were all captured using the same telescope, a 98mm refractor from my backyard. The two images on the left were captured using a Bader Planetarium Herschel safety wedge, combined with either a G-band or a calcium 2K filter. The image on the right was captured with a Solar Scope brand hydrogen alpha Etalon plus blocking filter. Each image is a stack of the best 200 frames out of 4,000, stacked in autostacker and sharpened in IM PPG. The G-band image represents the appearance of the photosphere. The calcium 2K, the appearance of the lower chromosphere, or if you recall from my previous presentation, the fluctosphere, it's fun to say, and the H-alpha image of the mid and upper chromosphere. I found it particularly interesting how malformed the sunspots are, with the penumbras all distorted and detached from the darker umbras. You can especially see this in the G-band image. That's it for me. See you all next month. Thank you.
Alrighty, thanks, Jim. And I could not agree more with your impressions about the aurora, the speed of its onset, the fact that it was reaching the zenith, and the idea that your shots were taken to the south. It was a brilliant experience. Okay, Rick.
Mick, I haven't seen Rick log in tonight.
Alrighty, then can we move on, please, Chris? And so now the other Thompson.
I guess that this is one of the challenge objects, or to see how many galaxies you can get in one frame. I was experimenting with a new smart telescope. You probably heard of the C-Star, and it arrived in mid-April, but I didn't get a chance to use it until around the end of the month. But this is sort of in the center of the constellation of Virgo. And I think I picked up about 13 galaxies there, and it goes down to 15th magnitude. Next. Okay, after taking this, that was, I believe it was a 40-minute exposure, and you can see a bit of field rotation because it uses an altazimuth mount, but I took the image and ran it through astrometry.net, which does a plate solve, and then it identifies objects. And it came up with these. You notice that some of them are marked. There's NGCs, New General Catalog. There are ICs, which is Index Catalog. And it turns out 3 of the ICs that are identified were actually errors in the catalog. They're actually stars and not galaxies. And then the faintest galaxy that I could confirm for certain was IC 3388 near the left bottom, and it's fainter than 15th magnitude. There's the 3386 and the 3182 are 16th magnitude, but I couldn't confirm. At least the astrometry came up, said it identified them, and yet when I looked, I couldn't see for certain that there was anything there. If I blew it up to maximum size and then moved around, sometimes I could just get a trace of something, but if I counted those 2, it would be 15 galaxies in there. But I'm not really counting them at 16th magnitude. Was probably beyond what this image could capture. Okay, next.
That's it.
Oh, okay.
That's it.
Oh, I thought I had a few more there.
Okay, yeah, John, you get another chance to present in August when we also have the distributor at C-Star.
Okay.
Presenting on the product, and you can do your unboxing and so on. Chris, sorry, Richard Taylor, back to you.
Can we move on to the picture? There we go. So I was at the Star Party on May 10th, and what a fantastic experience it was. I was doing a sort of regular Star Party things. I usually do the electronically assisted astronomy, as I was stacking up some pictures of a very faint galaxy and explaining what I was doing to the audience. And as we were waiting, somebody asked me, well, what are our chances of seeing an aurora tonight? And I said, oh, I don't think it looks very good. I mean, auroras usually are in the north, and it's pretty cloudy in the north, so I don't think we'll see much. And just at that very moment, everybody started going, wow, wow, look it up. And there was the aurora, as people have said, in the southwest. So I said, excuse me, I got to grab my camera. And this was the first picture that I took just after 10 o'clock. And I was just blown away by how many different colors there were visible in that aurora. It was just a beautiful, beautiful experience. Next, please. Okay, here are the challenge objects for last month. This is the constellation of Virgo. And I actually took this around the 25th of April from FLO. So at that point, it was rising in the eastern sky. But for the rest of the month, it's been moving across the southern sky as the days have gotten so much longer and the night's so short. It's now moving into the west by the time it's actually dark enough to see anything. Now, if we go to the next picture, I put on some labels onto this image. So the real highlight of Virgo, of course, is the very bright star Spica, following the arc of the Big Dipper through Arcturus and then speeding on to Spica. It's a pretty easy star to spot. The other stars in Virgo are not as bright, and the shape is kind of a weird one. So it can be a bit of a challenge trying to find the actual stars in this constellation. But as I said last month, the place to look in Virgo is just above Spica, north of Spica, where all the galaxies hang out. So in my next picture, I actually took a picture of Vindemayatrix, one of the upper stars in Virgo, and Denebola, which is the tail end of the Leo, the lion. And in between those two stars are many, many, many galaxies. Now, this picture was just my Canon M100 camera with its kit lens, nothing special, about a 15 millimeter focal length, 55 millimeter focal length aimed at those two stars. And I could see them on the live screen at the back of the camera. Now, this camera produces an image which is 6,000 pixels wide by 4,000 pixels tall. So what I've done in the next picture is just crop it down to 1,000 by 1,000. And then I could actually start finding a whole bunch of galaxies. Now, at this magnification, you'll notice that the stars are little streaks. This was, I believe, an 8-second exposure. Yes. So the stars did move. It was not tracked at all. Nothing special about the mount, just a tripod. But the galaxies definitely look somewhat fuzzy compared to the stars. So this is the kind of thing that you could be looking for with binoculars as well. If you're looking at this region of the sky with binoculars, you'll see a similar small area of the sky, and you should be able to see that some of the things up there are kind of fuzzy. Next, please. Now, my most galaxy, well, I've been going through all of the Messier objects again, and this just happens to be my most recent. I'm almost finished the Messier list now. I've only got one more object to photograph, but this was M61 in the middle of Virgo. And you can again see that there's a whole bunch of other NGC and PGC galaxies around it. But I particularly like the face-on spiral galaxies like this. They show such a lot of detail, a real pinwheel effect. So it's quite a pretty galaxy here. Next one, please. And the solar system challenge was the asteroid Pallas. And I actually had trouble finding this one because it didn't turn out to be in quite the same location as the Stellarium sky mapping software was showing me. So I had to try and look around in the area approximately where Stellarium was saying it was until I could find a little about 9th magnitude object. The real test, of course, is that it moves. And it was nice to be able to capture two views of the same star field on the night of May 24th. And just in the space of an hour and 3/4, you could see that Pallas had definitely moved locations. So that was quite a good confirmation that I had actually found it. Actually, I found it was moving so fast this last month that it would be in a separate field of view by the next clear night, since we didn't have very many of those. Next, please. I think, no, okay, this is my challenges for the month. So we've done Virgo. I didn't hear many reports about people finding galaxies with binoculars. Please do post on Discord if you do find something, and let us know what you're seeing during the month. We've had quite a few pictures on Discord and now tonight as well of people who've taken photographs of many galaxies. There are so many galaxies in that area of the sky. And many of them are very, very interesting in our pictures too. I wasn't the only person. Next picture, please. We had quite a number of people do the observations on Discord. Tony and Andrea got similar observations to mine of Pallas. Oscar produced a lovely, lovely picture of M87 with lots of other galaxies around it. And Andrea did, I think it was a region near Markarian's chain with a bazillion galaxies. Fred Burt as well and Tony Jarrett had the real superlative galaxy. It was a quasar, something that's the farthest possible thing we can see with a telescope. So gold stars to everybody who participated in this last month's observing challenges. Next one, please. So it's June, it's summer, and it's time to look for the summer triangle. I did see it myself the other night at FLO. It's rising in the east about 11 o'clock. There's a lot of trees in the east, so if you have a nice clear view towards the east, you might be able to see it a bit earlier, but it doesn't get dark very early these days either. So the summer triangle is formed by three very bright stars, Vega, Deneb, and Altair. So if you can find those, they're the markers for a whole bunch of very interesting things in the summer Milky Way. The other challenges for this month, if you want something a bit smaller, you probably won't be able to see it with the naked eye unless you go out in the country, but it's certainly visible in binoculars from the city. And that's a little constellation called Sagitta. And this one is the arrow, and it does very much look like an arrow. But it is quite small. It's one of the smaller constellations in the sky. So see if you can find Sagitta with the binoculars. And while you're in that region, go a little bit up from the tail of Sagitta for a very, very interesting thing that's not a constellation, but it's an asterism, a very interesting grouping of stars of a similar brightness, and it's definitely in the shape of a coat hanger. It's very funny to see that up in the sky. Now, in that region also is one of my favorite summertime objects, M27, the Dumbbell Nebula. Again, I was looking at that at FLO the other night. I'll post my picture in Discord real soon now. But I think this is the summer equivalent of the Orion Nebula. It's a planetary nebula, not a star-forming nebula, but it's big and it's bright and it's got lots and lots of detail. And it really, really comes out well if you can take a variety of exposures with your camera. And a relatively small telescope will work quite well on this. For a real challenge, move off to the side into the constellation Aquila, and there's NGC 6781. Now, this is one that I haven't seen myself, so I'm going to be challenged to actually see if I can find it this month. But it's called the Ghost of the Moon Nebula. It's another planetary nebula, fairly large, but very, very, very faint. So I don't think you're going to be seeing this one, but I think it should show up in the nice long exposure photograph. And we do have the opportunity now that this summer triangle is rising in the skies. I hope you'll be able to get a nice picture of the Ghost of the Moon. Next one, please. So there's your challenges for this month. Summer Triangle, Sagitta, Coat Hanger Cluster, Dumbbell Nebula, and Ghost of the Moon Nebula. Now for the solar system challenge, next picture, please. I got to thinking about going back and having another lunar challenge. And lunar challenges always make me think of Brian McCullough. But three different things have come out this month that made me think it's time to have people do some drawing. So I'd like you to take the challenge of drawing something on the moon. Brian gave me this picture to show you of one of the craters that he's actually drawn. He does intend on running some workshops later on this summer in how to draw the moon. But at the General Assembly, the RASC General Assembly last month, there was another talk about how we can get better observations by drawing things. You can see more if you actually try and write it down by drawing it. And they also gave a very interesting hint. When you're trying to draw the moon, it can sometimes help if you have a gray paper and white crayon for drawing the highlights and black crayon for drawing the shadows. That way you automatically get 3 different levels of brightness, and it can really help you focus your attention on what are the highlights and the shadows and see if you can get the shapes of them. And just by spending the time to look carefully and draw what you're seeing, I think you'll really find that it helps you understand the shapes and sizes and features of the moon, and you'll be able to see a lot more than you ever did just by a quick glance through an eyepiece. So that's your challenge. Draw something on the moon. Doesn't have to be wonderful art, but see what you can do to improve your own observation techniques and capabilities. There's also another article in Sky and Telescope this month about drawing things on the moon. So take a look at that too, but don't be intimidated by the artistry of a professional artist. Do what you can yourself. Whatever you can draw is a help to your own observations. And next one, we're still waiting. I'm sorry we didn't see Rick Wagner's presentation, but as far as I've seen, it's not doing much yet. So keep watching, and I hope we see something blow up. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. I think you've almost reached Andrea's record for the number of single presentations in one meeting this evening. So well done. Okay, we've got an announcement for a public outreach event for CHASM on Canada Day, particularly looking for solar equipped telescopes, some request for bilingual support. In the past, these types of events have had really impressive turnout. So anyone who can assist ASA, please let him know through outreach@ottawa.rasc.ca. If you have equipment or if you're just knowledgeable, if you are bilingual, then I'm sure he will appreciate the support. Next one, Chris. Our program for next month, again, I'm hoping to get a long distance connection, this time to Australia. Jen Bryant, avid observer and astrophotographer. Jim Thompson will give us his recap on Astronomy Day from this year. Boyan is going to give us a presentation on observing aids and how to use them. Catch up from Pierre Martin and Denis Legault on their eclipse experiences back in April, and then most of the usual stuff. Next one, Chris. And I don't know why this is Estelle's pick, but yes, next month we are back at CHASM. We are confirmed on July the 5th. We will still be doing a Zoom channel as well, but we will be meeting in person and going for beers afterwards. Next, members and guests star party at the Fred Lossing Observatory is on tomorrow, June 8th. And remember, you can bring your own equipment, or if qualified, use the on-site telescopes. Next one, Chris. Our thanks to all those who do stuff to keep the Ottawa Centre moving along. The usual list of rat bags there, but without whom none of this happens. So thank you all. And our extensive list of speakers tonight. I'm sorry we have run so long, but conversely, there were so many deferred presentations, I had to give them the liberty. And as usual, comments, critiques, complaints, confabulations, and conceptualizations to me. either at my email address as meeting chair or on the Discord, or to Claude the Koala in South Gundarumbra. Next, Chris. I know the Jims and the gang might be going off to Liam Maguire's. Good luck to you. I am envious. Next one. So next meeting, Friday, July 5th. It will be in person plus with Zoom. Hope to see you at Chasm. Hope to see you on Zoom. And again, contact me, meeting chair at ottawa.rasc.ca for presenting your observations, suggestions, presentations. So thank you and good night, and particularly thank you for your persistence. Cheers.